Hello and welcome to today's standards meeting update. This is the update for the March 2019 meetings. I am your host, Joel Welch, SMPTE's Director of Education. Thank you for joining us and spending a few minutes with us today. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before I turn the floor over to our guest speakers and introduce them. If you've been with us before, you may know this housekeeping, but for folks who've not joined us for our webcasts, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the series and about how to interact with your speakers. First of all, the SMPTE Standards Meeting updates are webcasts that summarize the activities of our standards community, activities at their quarterly meetings. We hold these webcasts quarterly as well. We try to get them out a couple of weeks after the actual meetings. They are complimentary, these webcasts, to everybody, and sessions are recorded and published for on-demand viewing. We do it in two places. We do it on the SMPTE website at SMPTE.org/standards-webcast on demand. You can see those. I'm not going to say the hyphens. And we also post them on YouTube. If you do participate in social media, please feel free to snap, post, update your status, post to Instagram, tweet, whatever moniker you use for your social media posts. The handle is at SMPTE Connect. Hashtag is hashtag SMPTE Webcast. We'd like to make these as interactive as possible, so if you would, we'll be taking breaks for questions periodically, and so have your questions queued in the question box for upcoming breaks. We'll take them quite frequently. We do prefer oral questions so that you can speak directly to your presenter, but if you don't have a microphone, we can also read your questions on your behalf. I will do that, and so your question will be asked. However, if you do type in "I have an oral question," you go right to the top of the list and your question will be addressed first. So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. They are probably familiar to many of you. We have Bruce Devlin, who is SMPTE's Standards Vice President, and then my teammate and colleague, Thomas Mousa Mason, who is Director of Standards Development on staff at SMPTE's home office. Gentlemen, you have control over the computer. The floor is yours.
So as Joel has so expertly pointed out, we are going to be talking today about what's been going on in the standards community. So the most recent SMPTE block meetings took place at SMPTE HQ in glorious White Plains. It was quite a lively set of meetings. We had some visitations. And I'll go through these photos in a second and tell you who was there and what happened. One of the reasons to show you these nice photos is to say we really do appreciate everyone who turns up and attends these meetings in person. And I know it's sometimes difficult to travel around the world, but we do try to move these meetings around the world to try and encourage physical attendance wherever possible. So White Plains is just north of Manhattan. Thomas, is there anything fantastic that the audience should know about White Plains?
Intuitively, I want to say no, but...
Oh, Thomas!
Well, it's a sleepy little town, and you don't say upstate New York, it's upper New York, so it's certainly less hectic than Manhattan or Brooklyn.
Absolutely, and both times we've been there has been March, and as you can see with me and a few others here, there's been snow on the ground. Get up early and you see these fantastic sunrises glinting off all the buildings and these lovely houses in White Plains. One of the lovely things that we did this time round is we had a dinner for all of the TC chairs, and it turns out that the master brewer where we were having our dinner turned out to be an ex-cameraman, and so he was so pleased that we were there. He took us all down and gave us a tour of his microbrewery in White Plains, which was absolutely fantastic. And I personally wanted one of these big paddles, which he uses to keep discipline in the brewery, which, so that would be an easier job for Thomas and I to keep discipline within the committee meetings. It was Pat Griffiths' birthday, 21 again. Happy birthday, Pat. The New York section came and visited and had an evening reception with all of us, and even the White Plains mayor showed up along with his assistant, and we took lots of photographs, and the White Plains mayor told us about all the shooting that's going on in White Plains, which is not quite the Hollywood of the East, but is slightly more glamorous than some areas around White Plains. So we were really chuffed to have all of those people there. We were there for 4 days, like all the block meetings. There was just the one stream, in other words, one set of meetings going on. We published 10 documents in the last quarter. We had 65 humans show up on site, and over 100 people altogether were on the various phone calls that we had. And 187 active projects on the list were dealt with. What did I forget, Thomas?
Maybe that we went to White Plains instead of Malaga, Spain.
No, yes. Well, I'm sure White Plains would be much better than the glorious beach resort in the warm sunshine of southern Spain at this time of year. I'd rather have snow. What about you?
Likewise, you know, nothing better than cold climate.
Yeah, shake the SMPTE pom-poms. There we go. So, just a reminder for those of you who are new on the call, just trying to see, I think most people are familiar with this, just looking at the names. So basically the structure of our standards community, we've got the Stucky at the top, the standards vice president, that's me, ably assisted by my very competent right-hand man, Mr. Thomas Bowser Mason, who keeps everything ticking along nicely. And the top level structure is a thing called the Standards Committee, and the Standards Committee basically is responsible for the smooth running of the standards process, and that's made up of 4 standards directors that I four standards directors that I appoint. There are 18 TC chairs, there's a single subgroup chair, 3 members of staff, and the previous standards vice president, Alan Lamshed, attends and gives us the words of wisdom for all the times I get stuff wrong, and I'm very appreciative for all the wise words he gives me. And then we have our standards committees, which we will be going through as we talk about the work that they have done over the past 3 months. And if you look at the various numbers, which you would have been able to do had we had a working workspace today, you would have found that we have 10 TCs, about 816 members, over 350 companies from 34 countries, 104 groups, and 187 active projects. And remember that all of this work is done by volunteers. Now, at the end of this presentation, we're going to be asking you for a quick vote for what we do in our June webcast. And Joel has a poll ready for the end. So after Thomas has given us the workspace walkthrough, would you like a deep dive in TLX, time labeling? It's timecode Jim, but not as we know it. Would you like a deep dive in SMPTE ST2094 and the 4 different flavors of dynamic metadata signaling for high dynamic range, getting the right metadata in the right scene? Or would you like a deep dive into OBID, open binding for IDs? In other words, how do we get these magic identifiers like IDA for program content and AdID for adverts? How do we get them from the production chain all the way into the TV set unaltered? So those are the 3 options. Please have a little bit of a think about that while we're talking, and Joel will put up a poll at the end and get you to vote. So just a quick preview of what Thomas is going to take you through. Up until about 36 hours ago, we were running on a thing called version 6 of Workspace. Now, Workspace is the online collaborative tool that we use for managing our calendars, managing the rosters, managing the documents, managing email discussions, doing ballots, and commenting on documents. So that is the Workspace tool that we were using. Workspace, or Kavi, which is the company that owned the product Workspace, was bought by a company called HireLogic, and they have this new thing called online communities. And there are some changes which are very important, and Thomas is going to walk you through those after we've been through the work list. The first is that it's not really Workspace anymore, because Workspace is now just a plugin. The thing is actually called Online Communities, or OLC, and we'll be referring to it as OLC. There are various navigation bars. The top one is an OLC specific navigation bar, And Workspace, as we know and love, and I use the word love with all the feeling that I can put behind it, is actually just the functionality of this tab here. And one of the key things that you'll discover, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is that there are no calendars. No calendars at all. You have to use this events thing. But Thomas will talk a little bit more about that later. There seems to be about a 5-second delay, so I'm not really sure whether I've clicked or not. There we go. So we're going to kick off just by talking through the new projects, and then we'll go into a committee by committee discussion. But before we do that, I just want Joel to leap in at this point and tell the audience how to ask questions.
Absolutely. If you want to ask an oral question, you type "I have an oral question" into the question box. And then, as I said, you go right to the top of the list. If you don't have a microphone, feel free to type your question in full, and I will read it on your behalf. And the queue is empty, so please feel free to ask questions whenever. And when we take breaks, such as this one, we will ask questions that are in the queue.
Thank you, Joel. And we do encourage oral questions because an hour of my voice and half an hour of Thomas's voice is usually more than most humans can bear, but I'm sure you lot are good and sturdy and you'll survive. So let's clack on down this list. So new projects I've signaled with this sort of red, this thing is new, as we go through the future slides. So you'll see all of these appear later on. Now, all of these links are live, so that if you get the PDF after this this event and you click on these, or you go to the standards community where this will be uploaded into the online community workspace documents section, you're able to click on these links and follow through to the list of all the projects. This is something that is public, and I'm fairly confident that when OLC goes live, this link will still work. That's something that we're working on literally as we speak. Likewise, all the public documents that SMPTE publishes will be at this link, and this link here is pretty stable. This is where we've published the OMs and the administrative guidelines, thanks to all the great work by Thomas and Carissa at HQ. So the new projects that kicked off this time round, we've got one from the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences called the Academy Spectral Similarity Index. In other words, I've got these two lights. How can I tell if the response of the cameras going to be similar between these two different lights? And in practical terms, it means that if I do a pickup shot in this studio and another one in that studio, what's the similarity between the two different lighting sources? We've got a study that's taking place in 30MR, the metadata group, on the use of UUIDs. In our file systems and packaging group, we've got a new project to standardize placing HEVC, the new MPEG codec, into MXF. The next project is in 32NF, Networks and Facilities, and this is how we put non-PCM audio data types into AES3. This is a revision of an existing document, and there's some new values from another new standard that need to be migrated over into that standard. Then those of you who are familiar with the broadcast exchange format will know that this goes through effectively sprints, or, well, I suppose it's SMPTE, so it's a slow jog or fast meander. And we've got a new iteration of BXF. So there's requirements that are being gathered for BXF, and the group is currently gathering those requirements and starting the work of standardizing those. So if you or your company or your partners or your clients are BXF users, and there's something that you've always wanted to be in BXF, you've probably got about 3 weeks to get in touch with this committee and let them know about the requirements. There is in 35PM, the IMF group, we've got some application 2E, an application 2E amendment to include the HLG, hybrid log gamma color scheme. So that means that App 2E will do both the PQ and the SMPTE 2094-X variety, as well as hybrid log gamma. Remember, hybrid log gamma doesn't need metadata. We've got some additional needs for TV J2K being promoted by the DPP and NABER, North American Broadcasters Association. And coupled with that, we have the requirements, we have the log of how those requirements were met, and then we have the actual document itself, which actually is a constraint of app2e. There's no new provisions being put into this technical specification. It is literally just a constraining document to constrain the way in which app2e is being used. So without further ado, we will then jump into the first of our technology committees, which is 10E, chaired by John Snow and Mike Sink. So as I previously mentioned, we've got the Academy Spectral Similarity Index, which is actually really hard to say. We've got a number of compression documents going through. So the first one is a large body of work, the VC6 document suite. The first document that's being put through is the Bitstream specification. That document has had 46 DG meetings and is getting to the stage where we think we should be able to get the first FCD ballot ready for that in June. And because it's a big document and it's new and it's different to the way in which MPEG works, and it's different to the way Dirac works, and it's different to the way Cineform works, and it's different to the way J2K works, the drafting group is going to put together a set of webinars to help the TC understand how this codec works, how the Bitstream works, and we're going to have a 4-week review before ballot rather than the normal 2-week review. So if you're really interested in this sort of work, I thoroughly recommend joining the TC and joining in and learning how this codec works. And this codec couldn't have been possible without the great work done by the VC5 guys. This one was known as the Cineform GoPro codec. There are 7 parts to this document suite, and pretty much the final part to be standardized is part 7, which covers the metadata. There are a number of comments during its FCD ballot, and those comments are just about resolved now. The guys have been doing good work. As a result of modifying those part 7, there needs to be some extra work done on the conformance and the reference decoder, and that work will start as soon as the previous bit of work has finished. Likewise, VC2 has been undergoing some changes. It's been stable for quite a while now, but there's new work required within the conformance tools to cover high dynamic range and WBG, wide big grandpas, should be WCG, wide color gamut. Bruce's typo continues to this set of meetings. So 10E is the Essence Committee. It looks not just at compression, but it looks at the general use of audio and video and data. So there's been a bunch of work going on reference displays. There's been quite a few FCD ballot comments on SMPTE 2080. That the ballot comment resolution is ongoing. And the measurement calibration work to do with reference displays, that drafting project has started, and the drafting work on that document is ongoing. Similar to the SSI from the Academy, there's a television lighting consistency index, slightly different problem with slightly different solution. It's having its second pre-FCD review, which is ending on the 21st of March, which actually means it's just ended. So pretty soon we will be starting the FCD ballot on that document. The high dynamic range and wide color gamut metadata project, SMPTE 2094. There are 4 different mechanisms that go into this standard, one of which, the SMPTE 2094 Part 40, or App 4, it was originally standardized in 2016, but there's a bunch of updates going into that standard, and there's quite a bit of comment resolution work going on before the next FCD ballot. And because this is an important document for distribution standards, such as the ATSC and the SCTE, it's something where we are drafting some liaison statements, and those will be distributed to the ATSC and the SCTE relatively soon as the drafting group is happy with its progress statement, and it forwards that through the TC to me. We'll be able to distribute those communications to the ATSC and to the SCTE and whoever else needs to know about the progress of this work. It's always nice to see a document finished. The P3 colorimetry work was finally published in January this year, so that group will then close. And the FS gamut and FS log characteristics of camera systems, that's passed through the SMPTE process and is in the publication queue. And yeah, you may remember from previous webinars that the study group on virtual reality and augmented reality, they were trying to figure out what it was that SMPTE should talk about. We've now got a small list of things that is relevant within the SMPTE work group, and that's going to be published in a short report, which should come to me relatively soon. At that point, we pause to see if anybody has questions on 10E.
We have no questions in the queue at the moment, but please, to our guests, please do consider asking questions, and you can always queue them in between these breaks so that we will ask them when we do break. Absolutely.
Thank you, Joel. So the 20F Film Committee tends to only meet once a year. They don't meet when we're on the East Coast, tends to be when we've got West Coast meetings that this committee meets. So there's no meeting this time around. So we'll jump on to 21DC, the Digital Cinema Technology Committee, which is chaired by Steve Lamb and Chris Witham. So a number of projects ongoing within the 21DC committee. The first is a bunch of updates and revisions to various documents in the DCP and DCDM suite. So the 429 Part 2 has a couple of different work items going on. The first is an amendment to add frame rates into new frame rates, high frame rates into 429 Part 2. That amendment has passed through its entire SMPTE process and was with HQ, and the subtitle revision is currently undergoing FCD comment resolution, and it looks like we'll probably finish relatively quickly, and so that amendment will then be applied and published simultaneously to try and minimize the confusion for recipients of that document. If for any reason this thing stumbles, then it is quite likely that we will publish the amendment independently quickly. The 428 Part 7 is currently studying the addition of Japanese subtitle support to do with the improvements on the underlying standard IMSC, and which is a constraint of TTML. So all of that ripples through to require a revision of this particular standard. 428 Part 1 has gone through the SMPTE publication queue and is ready to go. There was an error discovered in 429 Part 4 as it was just about to be published, and that's had to go back to start again. And then there's a few documents in the immersive audio group. Immersive audio is things like DTSX, MPEG-H, and Dolby Atmos. So the immersive audio track file has passed its DP voice vote and will be going through SD audit and entering publication queue very soon. Operational constraints for immersive audio, again, past DP voice vote. And the Dolby Atmos Bitstream specification, which is published as an RDD, that is now in the publication queue. Number of other things to do with immersive audio. The screen management OMB, Outboard Media Block Protocol, is awaiting a ballot. Likewise, the reference method is awaiting a ballot. And these two particular documents have been stalled based on other DCinema documents, and those in terms were stalled based on the underlying document, which is SMPTE 2098 Part 2. And effectively, now that that 2098 Part 2 was published back in December, all of these work items are unblocking, and the team, because it's the same human beings working on different documents, are processing these one by one. So if any of these are important to you and you need them prioritizing, please get in touch with the team and they'll sort out their priorities based on what people need. Otherwise, they'll just chug through them one by one, getting the documents out until they're all done. 430 Part 12 and 13 to do with immersive audio, FSK and key delivery. Those pass DP voice vote, and those will end up DP voice vote, and one's in pre-DP review, and those will end up in the publication pipeline relatively soon. And that's the DCinema work. Any questions?
There are no questions at this time.
Excellent. Then we will chug on to 24TB, which is the Television and Broadband Media Technology Committee. So this is the one that really focuses on ancillary services. So the first one was AV synchronization measurement and assessment. It was really waiting on the last bit of the suite, which was an engineering guideline, but the greater body of the participants figured out that the engineering guidelines not really needed. So the DG will close and the work's done. And I really have to give a silent but heartfelt round of applause to the people working on this, because this has been 4 or 5 years of really hard work and real painstaking, detailed standardization. So it's been an excellent piece of work that's been done here. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. 2016 Part 1 revision, which is active format description and bar data. There's been some updates pending to do with how you signal that in UHD. Still drafting. Personally, I have some questions on whether or not the delays are because the UHD community doesn't quite know what to standardize, but that might just be me, and I'm certain that if I say something contentious like that, somebody who knows more than me that's on this call will correct me when we ask for questions. Please correct me. I like being corrected. It makes my life. EG21, we are going to withdraw that document because it's basically not relevant anymore. One of the things that we've been waiting on is creating a withdrawal ballot for Workspace, and it seemed nugatory work to do that on the old Workspace, given that we were migrating to the new Workspace. So Mauricio at HQ has created a ballot, and as soon as the SMPTE online community is up and running, we can test out the new balloting system with this new withdrawal ballot. What could possibly go wrong? I'm sure Mauricio's done a great job and all problems will somehow be mine. Any questions on 24TB?
There are no questions in the queue. Bruce, you must be doing a wonderful job.
I'm sure, and I give people public opportunities to prove me wrong and humiliate me, and nobody takes it. I'm going to have to try harder and put some humdingers and real errors in this stuff to try and encourage people to point stuff out to me. The next technology is the cinema sound systems technology. The chairs of this are Brian Long and Bill Redman. So I did mention that there's been a lot of work done on the immersive sound model, Bitstream and renderer, and that this is the one that was flashing. The 2098 Part 2 is probably the document that wins the record for actually starting a revision before the first document was even finished. And this is basically because the original document was for cinema sound systems. As one would expect, these have nice integer frame rates, like 24 frames per second. But the first revision then had to take into account the world of IMF. The world of IMF lives in that uncomfortable boundary between the pure, wonderful loveliness of cinema and the slightly grubby fudginess of TV, where we have these things called fractional frame rates. Ugh, why would you do that? Oh, actually, I live in Europe. We don't do that. However, with fractional frame rates, you have to take other liberties with some of the timing models. And so the first revision that took place was to make certain that we did some IMF revisions for 2098 Part 2 to cope with some of the things that IMF has to deal with that the lovely world of digital cinema does not have to do. So this 2098 Part 2 document was a bit of a blocker for some of the other work, as I've already mentioned. And now that it's published and unblocked itself, the dependent documents such as the EG and the RP for interoperability testing, I haven't even had any wine yet, those have now been unblocked, and that work is now starting to chug through. So off the back end of that sort of work, there's some B-chain characteristics and expectations work. The internal report, the basic findings of the study group were presented to the technology committee in White Plains. And so a short written report is now going to be drafted. And then as a result of that report, the goal is to then transition the working group into a drafting group so that we can generate an RP, then an EG to formalize the findings of the study group. So that all seems like good work, seems like the right thing to do. And all of that went through at White Plains really quite nicely. And that is the progress of 25 CSS over the last few months. Any questions, observations, or scathing remarks on my presentation style?
I'll give you 2 guesses.
It's all nice and quiet. I'm even offering the chance here for Thomas to throw a spanner in, but he's being so nice to me today.
Your voice is so comforting, it makes me all cozy and fine.
Just stay awake until it's your turn. That's all I care. So the next group is 30MR, which at White Plains was chaired by John Hurst and Mike DeValue. And this is all to do with metadata and registers. So those of you who love dictionaries and thesauruses, or is it thesauri, or is it thesauri? Again, if you understand how Latin works, you can explain to me, because basically I'm an Australian. This is what this committee deals with. He says, waiting for the slide to change. There we go. So a new project has entered this committee to do with the use of UUIDs and file naming and how those two uncomfortable bedfellows live together. Sounds trivial, sounds boring, but you know what? In real workflows in the real world, where real files with real file names and real UUIDs start to be handled, this generates more of an operational nightmare than just about anything SMPTE's ever come out with. And I use that knowing that I personally am responsible for some of this chaos that has been pushed into the industry. So we're hoping that this new study group will actually start to put some nice guidelines together and make sense and put some rules together. So work that's happening within 30MR, the first one is ST330 UMID, the unique material ID. Now, those of you who are MXF weenies, such as myself, will know that every MXF file ever made since the first one back in the late 1990s has had a UMID in, which is an automatically synthesized 32-byte number, which should be unique. And so far, in all the files that I know of that have been processed, there's only ever been 3 clashes of UMIDs between independent machines, and all 3 of those clashes were caused by somebody hand editing the UMID and not letting the software do its automatic thing. So UMIDs are good, UMIDs are stable, UMIDs work nicely, and there's some good work being done on applications of the UMID, a UMID resolution protocol. The revision of the UMID document itself just closed its pre-FCD review, and RP205, which actually details some applications of UMID, that will start as soon as that revision is complete, because this one depends on that one. Now within 30MR, as well as UMID, which is actually a recipe for making random numbers, we have a number of metadata registers. And if you go to simptera.org, see this URL here, you end up at that page and you can click around and you can see literally thousands of magic numbers that make the whole professional media infrastructure work, and they're all remembered by SMPTE and all written down, and they're really boring, but without them, the industry would literally fall to pieces at the edges, a bit like a bit of knitting coming undone. And the structure of these different registers is defined in things like an element key register structure. And we're creating a new register for essence elements. And essence is things like HEVC, AVC, DNxHR, DNxHD, ProRes, all of these different essence elements, when they go into things like an SDI structure, or they go into things like MXF or IMF, all of these things need metadata to explain how it all fits together. And the register, the place where we remember these magic numbers, if you like, SMPTE's memory palace, that's what these documents are. And trust me, they are turgid. They are really difficult to read. And I have the greatest respect for anybody who works on these documents. Even, I work on them and I fall asleep. So this is really boring stuff, but the importance of it can't be underestimated. It allows levels of automation in the industry that we've never seen before. So an amendment to things like the metadata element dictionary structure, ready for ST audit, ST335, one of the most important dictionary documents. That's so hard to say without being accidentally rude. One of the most important dictionary documents in the SMPTE weaponry. That's just undergone an amendment, and again, huge respect to everyone who's been through it with a fine-tooth comb and checked that it all knits together properly, because without these couple of documents, you can't have this, and if you can't, without this, you can't have the whole MXF IMF ecosystem, and without that, just the cost of moving stuff around the industry goes up by an order of magnitude. IDD 49, professional metadata, is a registered disclosure document of one organization's professional metadata system. That's just passed RDD ballot, and that will be published relatively soon. The registers themselves undergo 6 monthly revisions, and every 6 months we publish a new revision of the entire metadata register. The next revision is codenamed Tabasco. I can't remember why it's sources, but it is. So this is just about to start its publications cycle. In the meantime, there's this kind of DG spreadsheet of essence elements, which will eventually go into this document. So all new essence elements are temporarily being stored in a spreadsheet because, well, spreadsheets. And we want to get away from that bad practice. So we also have this other thing that we've kind of got hidden behind our back somewhere that we will reveal when ST 2088 gets published. And the most exciting thing, possibly the most exciting thing for Mr. Hurst, is that he has passed the 30MR chairmanship baton to Dean Bullock, who's picked it up, looked at it slightly confused and gone, cool. So thank you, Dean, for picking up that baton. And we look forward to seeing you doing a great job, because you really do understand this stuff, just like John does. Any questions on 30MR?
There are no questions at this time.
Any sarcastic comments from Dean or John if they're on the line? Yeah, if you don't get in the first 20 seconds, I'm not going to give you more than that. So the next committee is 31FS, if the slides will change for me. If the slides will change for me. There we go. The chair of 31FS are Paul Gardner and Fred Walls. And this is all to do with files and systems. So I feel very embarrassed here because the first three of the first few projects here are literally in my ballpark. And because of the other SVP things I've been doing, I have not managed to budge these things forwards in the last year, for which I'm deeply sorry for all people who've been looking at this. But given that we're hoping to get the new SMPTE online community back alive on the 1st of April, I'm personally going to try and be the first documents through the 31FS system, see if I can achieve that goal. However, I'm fairly certain that I'm going to be trumped by, where is it, by this one, RDD 50. RDD 50 is the DNX uncompressed format, packaging and definition and mapping into MXF. And because I wanted to do this, the chairman of this particular group was very, very courageous and actually started his RDD ballot, should have said RDD ballot, sorry, that's a typo by me. He started his RDD ballot just before the Workspace migration, courageously is surfing across the migration wave and hopes to land his ballot on the other side of the migration, pick it up unscathed and continue the ballot process to get it all done before NAB starts. So good luck to you, Mike. I do hope that you managed to do that, and you've picked me to the post of being the first document to get into the new OLC system. But I do promise to do my homework at some stage so that Paul and Fred can stop nagging me. Other work that's going on in 31FS is a thing called KLV encoded extension syntax for MXF. This is a magic way to put new metadata in MXF in a way that MXF parsers can know and understand what that metadata is without having to write any new code. Really clever stuff. We have the revision for VC2 streams in MXF. That's in the publication queue. That project's been closed, and so that will be published sometime just before June, and that's the last VC2 document to chug through. The DPX format for high dynamic range, that document's been published, but a brand new project to create some reference software implementation, including a model for how DPX HDR works. That's been started, along with the project I've already mentioned, which is HEVC in the MXF generic container. And of course, the archive exchange format part 2, which is how do you archive something that has external bundles? How do you reference them? How do you link it all together so that the external bundle doesn't fall apart? That work is ongoing in 31FS. I'm predicting there won't be any questions, but I'm going to pause just in case.
And you are able to tell the future.
Ah, there we go. The next one is 32NF. Now, 32NF is the networks and facilities. So when you plug something into another thing and make it all work, this is the committee that does that. We have 2 new chairs, Thomas Kernan, who was working for Mellanox until the first day of White Plains when Mellanox was acquired by NVIDIA. So he's definitely working for one or other of those companies at the moment. We just don't know what to call the company. And Lee Whitcomb of Imagine. Both brand new chairs to SMPTE, so thank you very much, guys, for stepping up to the plate. And a massive thank you to Friedrich Gerlinger of the Institut für Rundfunktechnik, who has chaired the committee for 4 years and who's taken a step back to allow 2 new young guys to take the helm. Again, thank you, folks. Really do appreciate all the really hard work that all the chairs put in. So 32NF is the biggest and busiest of the committees. We're going to start off with the almost like the projects that have been around the longest, the SDI projects. So we've got an EG, which details all the different UHD SDI interfaces. That's in the publication queue, and this is a great big roadmap, big wall chart. There's been a massive amount of work on how you put HDR signaling and WCG, wide color gamut signaling, into the SDR ecosystem. And basically all of these documents are the last ones to get through the publication queue or get elevated to DP or in their pre-DP review. And this has been a massive body of work. And I have to do a big shout out to Dave Schnelly of Dolby, who's really just turned the handle on this over the last couple of years. It's been a massive body of work, and I can't thank you enough for all the hard work and the diligence that's required for this massive body of documents. It really is an impressive piece of work. ST2038, which is a revision of how you put ANC packets in an MPEG-2 transport stream. That FCD ballot should start relatively soon, as there's some human bandwidth to get that stuff going. Now, the ST2110 suite. ST2110, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 4 years, is essentially the way in which we put professional media over IP, and it's been shown at NAB, it will be shown at the upcoming NAB, it's been shown at IBC, it will be shown at the upcoming IBC. So if you haven't gone and seen this stuff in practice, I thoroughly recommend going over to the IP showcase at NAB or IBC and just going and looking at and touching it and just being in awe of the massive body of work that's been put together to make all of this stuff work. So a quick run through of the changes. We've got the system timing and definitions is basically how does the system work? That's undergoing a 1-year review. Lots of discussions in the drafting group about some of the real corner cases of how the system works. And I'm so pleased that there's so many people attending to those details. There's the constant bit rate for compressed mono essence streams for video. That's part 22. There's one comment there that's going to go through. More video, single essence streams over multiple ports. In other words, if your essence stream is 20 gigabytes and you've got 10 gigabyte ports, how do you do that? So that's that document. Then we've got a couple of things which are really untangling some of the way that we did stuff in SDI. So in SDI, to put metadata, we had to put it in blanking. It makes no sense to put metadata in blanking in video in IP. We should just put the metadata in IP. And that's what these documents are all about. How do you untangle the SDI layering model and put it so that the metadata is there and available and fast just at the IP layer? And that's what this is all about. Variable bitrate transport streams on IP networks. Waiting for a DP vote there. How do you switch RTP data diagrams seamlessly? That's in the publication queue, been through the SMPTE process. Likewise, 2022 part 6, which is how do you put encapsulated streams into the 2110 system. That's in the publication queue. There's still a bit of review to look at how you might put Black and Burst into a 2110 system with PTP. And a new project which has just kicked off this meeting round is to do with protocol implementation and conformance statements, or a PICS statement. And if you like, this is a checklist of the things that you should look at that references these standards, so that if you as a vendor want to say, hey, I've tested everything in the standards, this is, if you like, a statement that you can put out to say that I tested all of these things. There's quite a lot of examples of PICS statements on the internet, and this is new for SMPTE. So SMPTE is currently looking at how do we do PICS in a way that works for SMPTE. Now, time labeling and synchronization. There's a couple of revisions on the underlying documents. Again, lots of discussion on how PTP, which is the underlying timing system for SD2110, how does that work? How do we do things like alignment for all the different modes that we have? How do we do field coding? All of that's being talked about. There's results of interoperability groups, and oh, there's what? Security study groups? If only we had an expert on the call who could tell us what's going on in the study group on security, because this is new for SMPTE and it's a big ticket. Thomas, do you know anyone who can tell us about this?
I'm happy to tell you all about it, being the group chair.
You are the man, literally.
Well, pardon?
You are the man, literally.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm the man. There are lots of experts in that group. So it's actually a small, but we have representation from most of the bigger switch manufacturers. We have Arista on, we have Cisco, we have Imagine Communication, Mellanox, or maybe it's now NVIDIA. So we have quite a few people on there who have intimate knowledge of security for PTP system. Or let's say they know how PTP systems work and how they're implemented in switches. What the group lacks at the moment is expertise in cybersecurity. So if there's anybody on this call who has expertise in cybersecurity, please join this group, help us to evaluate what we're doing in this group. The activity at the moment, we are looking at putting together a list of PTP threats. We will try to model them using a model which we have yet determined. So there are 4 candidates out there. There's an ISO standard on this. There's our own proprietary workflow. There's something, I forgot the name. And then there's something from NIST. They have a cybersecurity framework, which we could use to model the threats. So we have a list of them. We're going to categorize them. We're going to put them in a table. There's an RFC 7384, which deals with security in PTP system from the IETF. So they have a nice table, and we took that as a guideline to build our own table. So at the moment, we're working on a text to make this effort a little bit more known. Probably there's going to be an announcement after NAB. We don't want to drown our announcement in all that NAB news noise, so we are going to wait till after NAB. But if anybody has interest in this, it's a big deal for the industry, I guess. And it's very much focused just on PTP for now. There might be subsequent efforts where we look at a little bit broader spectrum of cybersecurity, or where we pick another very narrow field where we can have a quick impact on securing these systems. I think that's pretty much it for this group.
Excellent, thank you, Thomas. And again, even if you're not a cybersecurity expert yourself, but you know somebody who is, if you happen to be down the pub or in a bar with somebody who turns out to be a cybersecurity expert who's not wearing a black hoodie and hacking into your mobile phone, or even if they are, but they're a white hacker, we need people within SMPTE who understand more than the existing experts do. So please send some recommendations, recommend to people that this is ongoing work that SMPTE will be doing. We don't want to boil any oceans. We want to be quite precise in what we're doing, but we do need experts to help judge what we're doing.
Yeah, and maybe one last comment. We're not working in isolation. We reached out to IEEE about this. IEEE is going through a revision of their 1580A PTP standard, and they're addressing a lot of security issues in that document. So we have a draft of that, so we're aware of what they're doing, and we're trying to make sure that we're not sending out a conflicting message to what IEEE is doing.
Cool. So chugging on, our new time labeling system. I was going to say son of timecode, but it's probably the great-great-great-grandson, granddaughter, grand thing of timecode. You know, anybody who's tried to work in a 100 frame per second or 120 frame per second system to try and synchronize systems together when you've got high-speed audio and high-speed data, time code's really a bit long in the tooth for that. So the extensible time label system is really what SMPTE is working on to try and turn this into a reality. It's one of the options for the deep dive that we do on the next one of these things. That is carrying on. We've got a group of experts all working nicely in that area. AS3 is the how you carry uncompressed audio and how you put data on uncompressed audio. So there's lots of work going on about how you put the ADM, the audio definition model, and MPEG-H and various other things. How do you put that into an AS3 environment? So those things are reaching the end of some of their standardization, and we hope to get those into the store relatively soon. Any questions on 32NF or volunteers to join the security group?
In fact, Tom Coughlin says, let me know regarding the cybersecurity issues. I also have IEEE connections.
Ooh, thank you, Tom. Much appreciated. And if we bump into each other at NAB, the beer's on me, especially if you manage to find someone.
And that's the only item in our queue.
Thank you. 34CS, Media Control and Systems. Brand new chair in the hot seat here. So Chris Lennon, after sitting in the chair for 4 years, has relinquished his seat, but still has a firm hand on the future of BXF. And John Footen, first-time SMPTE chair, is stepping up to the plate, along with Carl Paulson, who has good experience. And again, I have to give a big shout out to all the new chairs who are stepping up to do this for the first time. It's really good to see people not being too terrified by leaping into the fray. So we've got a bunch of projects. The first lot is the BXF projects. So BXF 6.0 has essentially reached the end of its cycle. There was a little bit of a hiccup when it got to just about being published, and it had to go back to an FCD and then go back through the DP phase again. But we've got through all of that. So BXF 6 Part 4 has been published, and 1, 2, and 3 have all been elevated on their draft publication voice vote, and those will be in the store relatively soon. As I pointed out right at the beginning, BXF 7 requirements gathering is ongoing, and those of you who are in the BXF space who try and join the traffic systems to the underlying working systems that make certain that content goes in one direction and money goes in the other, if any of that's important to you and you've got requirements for things BXF ought to do, literally just now, as soon as we finish, now's the time to get in touch with that committee and talk to them. Although actually you probably have to wait until Monday because the email reflectors don't work. We're still getting Workspace sorted. MDC, the Media Device Control. Now, one of the things that I did when I became SVP is ask these people to talk to the AES-70 people and to make certain that we're not reinventing too many wheels, and there was at least some commonality where possible of object models between what NMOS is doing and what AES-70 is doing and what SMPTE is doing. So this work has had a bit of a redraft and done some liaison and is closed the gap on those different bits of work. And sometime once we can stop just doing workspace issues at HQ, I'll actually leap into this and try and start a new bit of work to do with, is there some sort of common framework for a high level and low level control model that works across the industry? Because the more people I talk to, the more I feel that that's something that SMPTE can probably work with AES, can work with the ATSC, can work with other organizations to make certain that top down and bottom up control at least have some good interfaces in the middle that allow the world to be somewhat simpler. And to that end, a piece of work that was started about 6 months ago, the media microservices overall architecture, that was started, and we put together some framework ideas, what the terms and definitions were, and overall architecture, requirements, and some decomposition documents. That drafting was started with the help of some people from Hunan TV, but effectively the work's ground to a bit of a halt because we need more media microservices experts. So if you know your way around an open API document, and if you know the difference between your Swagger and your SOAP, then you're the sort of person that we need in this group to try and help us move this work forward. So again, please get in touch with the 34CS chairs, because we'd really like SMPTE to be doing something in this area. And I've got some big plans, but we can't do the big plans unless we have worker bees to actually help do the work. So counting on you folks to help move this work forwards. Any questions on 34CS?
There are no questions in the queue, Bruce.
In that case, we'll move on to the last of our TCs, which is the Media Packing and Interchange Committee, chaired by Pierre Lemieux and Florian Schleich. So this is essentially the committee involved in IMF. And the document maintenance team has been doing a bit of an experimental workflow, which I personally think has been wonderfully successful. And I am absolutely overawed at the amount of discussion that's been going on and just the rigor with which these documents have been worked on by this team. It's a real exemplary workflow, and I'm hoping to roll this out amongst other TCs who are open to working in this way. So essentially we have a closed GitHub team which is available there, and if you're a member of TC35PM, ask the TC chairs and you can be invited to be a member of this closed team, because again, it's a due process working group. So issues are raised, just like a piece of software. We think there's an issue with the specification or with the standard or with the RP or with the EG. Those issues are then worked on until we think we have a solution. Those issues are then closed, just like bugs in software. And then if the document needs to be updated as a result of the resolution of those issues, we update the documents. And again, big shout out, not just to the TC chairs who are helping run this. Florian particularly is the chair of this particular working group, also to Raymond Young, who is diligently typing into these documents to make them right. And so we've got this great agile little workflow going on to make these documents right, and we seem to have really had a great discussion from implementers, and this is looking really like a good slick software process. I'm really pleased with the way that this has been going. Net effect is working drafts of these documents are coming up, bubbling up to the surface, and they're going to end up in the TC. Once they've gone through their working draft and their pre-FCD review, they will then go into the TC for FCD ballot and hopefully pop out the other end. One of the big changes that has gone in is an amendment to App 2E to add the facilities for HLG, hybrid log gamma. And at the request of the TC chairs, which was a really good suggestion, this is going in as an amendment because it's essentially a completely orthogonal access of App 2E functionality, orthogonal compared to the sort of fixes to the spec and standard that have been going on in this group. So this is going through as an amendment. They're going effectively in parallel, and then at some stage in the future, probably the next iteration of this GitHub type work, this amendment will be rolled into some future 2067 part 21. The Plugfest EG is going on. The new next Plugfest in London has started already online. So the virtual Plugfest is happening now, with the physical Plugfest taking place on the 14th of May in London, hosted by Amazon. If you want to attend that Plugfest, please get in touch with the TC because it's being conducted under SMPTE rules. And if you're a TC member, you can ask to join. Guests are also allowed. So if you're not a TC member, but you want to join as a guest, again, you need to ask the TC chairs who will give you a guest participation form. And that's true for non-SMPTE members as well. And the guest participation form for non-SMPTE members goes to Thomas. And with Thomas's and my approval, that person can then take part in the Plugfest. The immersive audio Bitstream that was awaiting the 25 CSS work, that is now awaiting ST audit because that plugin for 2067, depends on the underlying work. There's, as I pointed out, some revisions taking place to the business requirements for the technical specification, and those changes to the business requirements will result in a constraint called the DPP neighbor constraint of the app 21, app 2E, Engage Brain. And that brings me to the end of all the technology committees. Any questions on 35 PM or any TC at all?
There are no questions at the moment. I would like to sort of hijack this for a little bit. As you know, we do standards webcasts on specific SMPTE standards to explain what they are. And for the 20 people that are online, I would like to ask for your opinions as to what standards we should be covering in, say, the next 6 to 12 months, so that we can make sure that we are addressing your needs. And you can either do a single standard, you can do a couple standards, few standards, whatever. But that will help us in identifying what to do to best meet your learning needs about SMPTE standards.
And I have to say that these, if you haven't been on a SMPTE standards learning webcast, they are very good. They tend to be done by the author or one of the lead members of the standards team. And, you know, if you really want to know the intricacies of IMF or 2110 or PTP, or I don't know, I'm sure there's a webcast to do with security. If anybody could find a volunteer to do it, maybe you could ask Thomas Joel. You know, maybe he'll volunteer himself.
Sorry, guys, I had to drop off.
No, you don't.
I'll knock him up. I'll set him up. You knock him down, Thomas. So moving on. So next meetings. So 17th to the 20th of June, face-to-face in Tokyo, Japan, being hosted by Imagica. Thank you very much, the folks at Imagica. We've got a great set of meetings going on there. That's Monday through Thursday, including tours at NHK. And on the Friday, the IMF user group meeting is taking place on the Friday in the same location. So you get double the bang for your buck, including tours and lectures and all sorts of wonderful stuff. So if you can make it to Tokyo, I thoroughly recommend it. Book your hotels now because it's Tokyo and they fill up and it gets expensive. I'm really looking forward to that one. 18th to the 21st of September is our traditional European meeting straight after IBC, and this one's being hosted by Fraunhofer in Erlangen in Germany. Again, looking forward to that one. Some good hearty food to help us through the winter. Love that town. And then in the winter, we're going to somewhere where we hope the sun will shine. Santa Clara, Arista are hosting us again. Really, really nice place, really nice facility. And if anybody wants to come and ride bicycles with me early in the morning, there is a fantastic climb up the hill just on the outskirts of Milpitas, which allows you to eat at least 3 croissants before you put any weight on whatsoever. And with that, that brings us to some information about the Higher Logic online communities. And I will stop talking. And Thomas, tell us in as much time as you want about what we've done and where we're going.
Yeah, I can give you a high-level overview of this online tool. This is really the tool where we conduct all the work Bruce talked about. Obviously, we have the face-to-face meetings, but the underlying tool to enable all this work to do all document editing, document management was Workspace, which is now the online communities, or how we call it now, OLC. You're going to see that more often in future. And with that, Joel, could you bring up the browser? I assume, Joel, you can hear me and you're just feverishly, there we go. Okay, this is when you follow the link Bruce talked about earlier, which should be the same link you used today to get to Workspace if you're using our tool there. It brings you to this landing page This is a new phase of Workspace or OLC, and I always found it a bit confusing because you end up on this landing page and it looks like you're logged in, but if you don't look into the upper right corner, you will not see that you're not. So that has some effects, especially if you're going to search. Let's say 10E. Then your search will deliver no results and you will not be alerted to the fact that you actually have to log into the tool. So let me go back to the site before, if that works. Yep. If I log into the site, you have the option to stay signed in. You can log in. Oh, great. Traffic lights. Did I get them all? There's one. Okay.
This is going to be so embarrassing in every committee meeting we have, you know. There's going to be all sorts of TC chairs who can't tell the difference between a traffic light and a tail light.
But once you're logged in, you get some your custom user manufactured content. You get some latest discussion, recently shared files, which are files from your communities you signed up for, and then you get the upcoming events. If you get to this page, there's a gray navigation bar up here, which we think you should ignore except for the menu communities. Communities is now basically replacing the term technology committees. I mean, we still at SMPTE will have technology committees, but OLC is just calling them communities. If you go into the link, you see there are, you have the choice between all communities. These are the communities you have signed up for or not have signed up for, so you get all of them. Or you can go to My Community, and that brings you to just the specific communities or groups, SMPTE groups you signed up for. I logged in. I'm an administrator for this tool, so you will see a little bit more on what I'm showing you on the screen than when you log in. I'm basically by nature signed up for most of the groups, but let's look into this. The search bar up here, I wanted to mention, if you do a search there, it's a very quick way of getting to a group. If you want to, so let's say you're looking for 10ETC, you get a list, and I think there the fourth item in the search results is the 10ETC. If you click on it, it brings you right to the TC. So let's go back. So, but if you're coming in and you want to just go to your groups, you go to communities, you click on the menu, you select My Communities, and it will bring you right to a list of communities. Again, I have some more groups than you probably have, and so your view will differ. This is a custom user view, so it will differ from user to user. Let's go to a different TC. I know where we did, again, you have the search bar up here. I go to 21DC. I know in 21DC, we did a lot of testing. This site you're seeing is our sandbox, so it's not the actual site you're going to interact with. So this is you're going to see a lot of test messages. TC 21DC, that's one of the group where we did a lot of testing. There's a calendar grid here which will go away, so please disregard that. But once you get here, you see you have your latest discussions. There's a little field here where you can add announcements. This is important for if you're a group chair, you can post little messages to your group. So if a user logs into the group, he can see this message and you can transfer some information to them. Latest shared files, which are in the group. So fairly comprehensive look of stuff you might be interested in. So when you log into a group, you have on top, you have the gray navigation bar. That's really the one which has global effect on the higher logic online community. So I urge you to disregard it maybe only for the search bar in the communities. There's a second menu bar, or let's say there are tabs here, which you can see here. It's community home, discussions, library, events, members, and workspace. Discussions is where you write your emails. That is where you can send emails to other users, to the group, and whoever you want to. It's a fairly restricted dialogue you're getting. There's a button here called Post New Message. You have a list of all the messages which went out in this group. So if you click on this post message, post a new message, you get a dialog box here where you can select who you want to send the message to. So you can select your group. If you're in 21 DC TC, then you most likely want to send it to the 21 DC Digital Cinema group. So you just leave it as is. You can send it to other groups as well. So I could pick, for example, 10E Essence if I wanted to send the message there as well. You don't have a custom CC field anymore where you can add email addresses. That doesn't exist anymore. There's a little field which says where the message is coming from, and then you have a subject line, and underneath here you have a window where you can add your message, and then on the bottom there is a signature field which you can add. Again, this is the sandbox. You're seeing more information here than which will actually be in the production system we're going to be using, or you're going to be using, and we're going to be fully GDPR compliant in the new system. So that means the telephone number and my address you will not see. You can attach a file and so on, and then you send the message if you like. Going back to the discussion.
Just to point out at this point, Thomas, to leap in with a bit of commentary, the old email lists that we had, lists@simpte.org, will not work, do not work. And if you're relying on those today, it's going to be bad because they're not there, and they will respond with no end result. So what you'll find that, yeah, using these services, you end up with a different mailing list address. And those mailing list addresses are reliable with solid delivery protocols, but there are likely to be some issues, at least in the short term, in terms of relying on them and initiating new communications via email. So until further notice, what Thomas has just shown you is the way to initiate a conversation in your group, whether it's a TC or a drafting group. So that is a bit clunky, but it's the way that we have to do it to make certain that everything gets correctly initiated in the formal record of what SMPTE is doing.
Yeah. So carrying on, there's another tab which is called Library. I would recommend that you ignore that as well. This is not where your documents will end up. This is a place where you can see all the email attachments which are sent to you. So we're still trying to figure out how this can be useful for our work. For now, I would say just ignore them. The next tab is Events. Under Events, that's where you set up meetings. We can jump in here. You can review meetings. So you get a list of different meetings which were set up. and then there's a button where you can add a new one. There's a little menu here, which I don't think has any value for us at the moment. So let's click on Add an Event. Oh, Joel, you are muted.
I popped up just to let you know that there is a question in the queue.
Okay.
Oh, they like you more than me, Thomas.
The question is from Brian. Brian asks, are you saying to use Sandbox today for messaging, or I suppose you meant the new Workspace when it is up and running?
Yeah, we're not going to use the Sandbox. I'm using the Sandbox for this demo because the production system we are supposed to use is not up and running at the moment. So unfortunately, there were some issues which we discovered yesterday was the day when we migrated from the old Workspace system to the higher logic OLC. This morning we tried to log in. Unfortunately, we're not going to get authenticated. So we're working on resolving that issue. We defaulted back to the Sandbox just to have a system to give you some guidance on how to use the production system. So the production system will look very similar, but you will see real data. This is all test data which was inserted, and you will also see some of the quirkiness, which I'm going to get to when we set up an event, that will disappear as well. So this is just a workaround to enable you to get this tour through Workspace.
Okay. Andy has a follow-up, or has a question as well. He says, I don't have permission to add event in the Sandbox. Will I have permission to add event in the group I chair when the real system goes live?
That depends on what role you're playing in SMPTE, and if you're group chair, I'm sure you'll be able to set up events. If you're a normal user, you might not be able to set up these events. If you're getting on the production server and you are a group chair and you want to set up an event and it doesn't work, you should let us know, and we're going to check your permissions and make sure that you have the functionality you need.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'll go away now.
Okay. See ya. Okay, let's click on this. You get a little dialog box again. There's the title you can give your meeting, and here this is where you choose. This is where it becomes a little bit confusing. What we're doing at the moment, there are different templates in here, and the template we're using at the moment for reoccurring events, but also single events, is this reoccurring event type. To the previous question, this will be cleaned up, and there will be a more fitting name for this template. So in future, we're also going to clean up this template list, so you're not going to have as many templates in there. I think ideally there should be just one template in there which you use to set up an event, and that will populate this dialog box with some default values. The community you have here. There's display event until end of date, then hide. So you have it in your list, which you can see here on the screen in the background, a little bit grayed out. So the event will show up there. Once the event is over, the event will disappear from the list. You have the option to choose a different one. We don't recommend it. We felt it would be better to have a clean list. So once an event is over, it's gone. I'm not sure, Bruce, if there's a way of looking in the list of meeting events for for events which are hidden because they are passed. Do you know if that exists?
I don't. It's somewhat confusing the way the events list is presented, but until we find something better, we just have to live with the events list as it is. So I'm fully expecting there to be complaints. Not much we can do about it because that's all that there is, and we have to have a formal record, and this is it.
Yeah. So here in this description box, you can put your call-in information, go-to-meeting, any information you want to send. So we don't have like 3 windows anymore like we had previously in Workspace. So that's going to go away. You have to use just this one. There's an URL if you want to point at a external site, but which we don't recommend. I'm not sure what image you would like to upload for an event, but that function is there. We're probably not going to use it. And then here here are fields where you can determine if this event is a single event or a reoccurring event. If you want to have it reoccurring, you can enter the number of events, and then it will repeat it as often as you want to. This is the slider where you can set for TC meetings. It's required to record your attendance because it affects your voting rights. For drafting group meetings, you don't need this, so you can switch it off. That's something we took over from the previous Workspace. Then start and start the date of the meeting. It's a bit misleading, but the meeting starts on the this one would start on the 28th of March and at 14:18, and then it will end at let's say an hour later, 15. You can choose your time zone. Well, let's say Eastern. And then down here is actually, oh, I'm was at the wrong. Here is actually a slider where you can say, I want this to be a single event or I want this to be a repeating event, right? And then if you set this to yes, you get the options for your repeating events. I wanted to note that every value with an asterisk, red asterisk, is a mandatory required value. Joel.
Yes. Brian has a question. He says, I routinely use fields and old events to create new events, so would be good to be able to see the old events even if they are hidden. I guess that's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's actually I hadn't had the time to look if it's possible to unhide hidden events. I assume because it's saying hide that it doesn't delete them, right? But I have to do some more investigation to see if there's a function how to unhide them. There's still a discussion going on about if we want to change this default setting in the meeting, which I explained in the beginning, to always show. The concern we had, you end up with very long lists depending on what group you're in. But that's an option as well. So they would be never hidden, right? Okay, so there's a location field here. I'm not sure how that is helpful. So it's not a required value, so I would just ignore it. And then you have a field here. If you click on insert my contact information, it will populate it with my contact information. And again, once you're in the production system, because we are GDPR compliant, the phone number would go away. I think you can still see the email, but I'm not sure.
Thomas, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
The location field, if you put the GoToMeeting URL in the location field, nearly every calendar client does the right thing. So you select, and then the location actually ends up on
right.
clickable thing. Whereas if you bury the GoToMeeting details in the body of the email, the system has some formatting problems and the link becomes unclickable. So the most important thing is call it a conference call or just call it a physical location and put the URL for your GoToMeeting in the location. Otherwise, it's quite hard to click on the link.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's actually, you're right. I forgot about that. If you set up an event, always select conference call. So that actually makes it a GoToMeeting event. If you select online, I believe it requires you to enter a URL. Oops, I deselected it. So there we go. So, but at the end, you can then invite all your community members when you save. So you would set this to, let's put in here a text. There you go. And if you hit, sorry, lots of scrolling. Save and continue will save the event and bring you right back to the dialog with the event information. If you click save, oh, what did I do wrong? Ah, I didn't enter a title. Let me go back down. And save now, and we're fine. So we are promised that once we are on the production system, the response time of the system will be better. So, and here you have your event. So if you want to go back, then you can go. Oh, Joe.
Oh, don't let me interrupt. There's a question, but.
No, go ahead. I'm happy to do it right away.
Okay. Brian asks, can all of the dial-in information be placed in the dial-in instructions as we do now, or just the GoToMeeting URL only?
I usually just do the GoToMeeting, all the information in there. I believe that should be the way to go. Bruce, is there any reason you couldn't do that?
There was a weirdness with the way it worked. I think the location field maps to the location in things like Gmail and Gcalendar and iCal and the others, whereas in the notes field you put all the information down there. So in the location, keep it short, and in the notes field, keep it long. A bit of experimentation will figure out the right way to do it. One of my goals tomorrow, assuming the system's up and running, is to actually put some of these handy tips in a separate community board that actually tells you some of the workarounds and some of the tips. And I'll try and start that off because I'm in the UK time zone while everybody else is sleeping, assuming that I can log on to the system. And I do have to point out that I need to vanish in 3 minutes because I have another another call to chair. So Thomas, if you're happy carrying on, please carry on, but I will vanish in 3 minutes.
I can be very short because I think these are the main new menus or areas we need to discuss. There's a member section 2 where you can look up members. This is a search field, so you can enter some name and then find. So that will give you the person. There's a list of people who are involved in 21DC. We recommend to not use this because there's another way of looking up members, which is maybe more reliable. If you click on the Workspace tab, the Workspace tab is really where you find the old Workspace you're used to. If you're looking at this now, you probably will recognize there's a lot of similarity to the system you used before. And that will be, this is basically the Workspace plugin, how they call it. So they told us they ported most of the code from our old system into this plugin, which you can find under Workspace. I'm not going to dive into these items because they're basically exactly the same items as they were in our old system. If you want to look up members, use the roster and not the members tab. I know it's a bit confusing, but this is the more reliable way of looking up members. So I guess with that, I mean, these is really just a high-level work overview. We're trying to put together more training material. Bruce mentioned that he's going to put some up on the Workspace or the OLC system itself. This video will, I believe, go on the website as well. And there's a training session with higher logic on this, which we will record and put on the website as well. And with that, that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Thomas. And I will give our guests one more opportunity to ask Thomas questions. I believe Bruce has departed, as he said he would. But while people are considering those questions, I'd like to put up the poll because what Bruce has done is added this second topic to the meeting updates. And we'd like to hear your views on what you would like to see covered during the next standards meeting update webcast, besides an update on the standards activities. But also, while you're thinking about it, we didn't get any response to the question I posed about what standards we should do a full webcast on. But I'm going to launch the poll right now. And all you need to do is just click on the topic that you would like included in the next quarterly meeting update webcast, but also any questions that you might have for Thomas. You can either type them in or say, I have an oral question, and we will take care of those as well. And we'll keep that poll open for a few minutes to give people a chance to do that. And also looking forward to any responses that we might have about what standards we should cover in depth. And Brian says, I would like to see all three topics in whatever order is convenient. Well, good. Those are apparently very important topics to people. And the responses are coming in. So I can, in a moment, show everybody what folks have voted. I will now close the, well, 80% of the people have voted. If one more person votes, we'll go ahead and close that, close the poll. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll, and I'll share the results with you. The reason I asked for one more vote is until we received that one more vote, all three of the topics were absolutely even. So just thought we might have one that was just a little tiny bit more desired, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to hide that. I will pass the information along to Bruce and to Thomas. And Thomas, thank you. I will thank Bruce separately, but also like to thank our guests for joining us. If you're traveling anywhere, take care, safe travels. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on a SMPTE Standards webcast, a technology webcast, or perhaps the new Essential Technology Concepts webcast. So take care, everybody. Bye now.